I used to work night shifts as a security guard at an old office building downtown. To be honest, it wasn't a glamorous job. Most nights, it was just me, my flashlight, and the sound of the air conditioning humming through the empty halls. The building had this hollow, lifeless feel after everyone clocked out at 9 p.m. My routine rarely changed. Check each floor once an hour, then sit at the desk in the lobby, fighting to stay awake until sunrise. For the most part, it was uneventful, peaceful even. But there was one night I'll never forget. It started out like any other. I clocked in around 9:45, grabbed my radio, and did my first round. The building was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your own footsteps sound too loud. I passed rows of darkened cubicles, empty break rooms, and conference spaces with the blinds pulled shut. Everything looked normal. By midnight, I was halfway through my second round, walking the 6th floor. That floor always felt different, colder somehow. It was mostly under renovation, plastic sheets taped over doorways, construction signs leaning against the walls, and bare concrete patches where carpet had been stripped. My flashlight beam danced across dusty windows and stacks of boxed equipment. I hated that floor. That's when I heard it. The sound came from one of the conference rooms halfway down the hall. At first I thought I'd imagined it. Maybe just the pipes, or something settling in the walls. But then it came again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, each one echoing through the empty corridor. I froze, staring at the conference room door. I knew that room. It had been locked for weeks, marked off with a bright orange, "Renovation Do Not Enter," sign taped to the glass. No one was supposed to be in there. "Hello?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. My voice bounced back at me through the hall. The knocking stopped instantly. Silence. I waited, straining my ears for movement. Nothing. No shuffling, no reply, just the low hum of the fluorescent light above me. I hesitated, then pulled out my master key. The door creaked as I unlocked it, the sound too loud in the stillness. My flashlight beam swept the room. Empty, completely empty. The walls were bare drywall, the carpet stripped down to rough concrete. No chairs, no tables, no tools, nothing but an echo. I let out a shaky laugh. "Great," I muttered to myself, jumping at shadows again. I started to turn, ready to close the door and get back to my rounds. That's when I heard it again. Only this time, it wasn't coming from the door. It came from the far wall of the conference room. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The sound was muffled, but distinct, knuckles rapping against drywall, like someone was trapped inside the wall itself, trying to get out. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. My skin prickled, goosebumps rising along my arms. I backed out of the room, fumbling for my radio. Jim," I said, my voice shaking. "You there?" Static crackled, then my coworker's bored voice answered. "Yeah, what's up?" "I'm on 6. You hear anything weird tonight?" "Nope. Why?" I swallowed hard. "I think there's someone in the conference room. Or, I don't know. Something." Jim chuckled. "You're spooking yourself again." I'll head up relieved. I lowered the radio. That's when I noticed it. The glass window on the conference room door. I swear to God. As I stared, faint handprints began appearing on the glass. One after another, smudged and foggy, as if someone inside was pressing against it. They dragged slowly down, leaving streaks like sweat or condensation. I stumbled back, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The handprints grew clearer, more defined, until I could see individual fingers pressing flat against the glass. And yet, The room behind the glass was still empty. I had just looked. There was nothing there. The overhead light flickered. A low buzzing filled my ears. That broke me. I bolted down the hall, my footsteps echoing like gunshots in the silence. I didn't care how it looked. I wasn't going back. Not for anyone. Not for anything. By the time Jim finally reached me on the stairwell, I was pale, sweating, and shaking like a leaf. He kept asking me what I'd seen, but I couldn't get the words out without sounding insane. I just told him, "Don't go in there." He rolled his eyes and laughed it off. "You need more sleep, man." But the next morning, when the renovation crew showed up, they weren't laughing. I overheard one of them talking to the foreman at the front desk, complaining about strange banging noises inside that same conference room. Said it sounded like someone trapped behind the walls, pounding to be let out. I quit that job a month later. I couldn't handle walking those empty floors anymore, especially not that 6th floor. But here's the part that still gets me. I can close my eyes right now and see those handprints, smudged, desperate, clawing for freedom. And I'll never forget the way they looked on that glass, like someone was begging to get out. And maybe I should have let them. I've told this story only a handful of times, and every single time, I feel that same cold sweat forming at the back of my neck, like the memory itself is watching me. This happened 2 years ago, and I swear to you, it changed the way I look at empty roads at night. Back then, I worked long shifts at a warehouse outside of town. My drive home usually put me on the rural highway around 11:30 or midnight. That stretch of road was endless, miles of asphalt cutting through cornfields and patches of woods, with no lights, no houses, no gas stations. Just you, your car, and the dark. Most people hated driving there alone at night, but I didn't mind. In fact, I found it almost meditative. The soft hum of the tires on the pavement, the rhythmic flicker of white road lines, and the occasional rush of cool air if I cracked the window. It was peaceful. That kind of silence where you feel completely cut off from the world. At least, it used to feel that way. I remember one particular week when I started noticing something strange. 3 nights in a row, I passed by what looked like a figure standing on the shoulder of the highway. The first night, I brushed it off as a mailbox or a signpost that my tired eyes had turned into a person. The second night, I slowed a little, squinting through my headlights. But by the time I reached the spot, there was nothing there, just tall grass swaying in the wind. By the third night, I told myself I was imagining things. I laughed it off when I got home, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone really had been standing out there. The 4th night is when it happened. It was just past midnight. The sky was clear, stars scattered across it, the moon a faint glow barely lighting the fields. I had my radio off, window cracked just enough to let in the smell of damp earth and gasoline. My eyes were tired, but I wasn't drifting off. I was alert enough to notice it. A figure. This time, there was no mistaking it. Standing on the shoulder, right where the tree line broke, was a man, dressed in dark clothes, hands at his sides, not walking, not waving for help, just standing perfectly still, like he'd been waiting. As my headlights washed over him, I felt that instinctive chill crawl up my spine. Something was off about the way he stood. Too stiff, too deliberate, and even though I couldn't see his face, I knew he was watching me. I didn't slow down. I didn't stop. I pressed harder on the gas and kept my eyes forward. That's when I heard it. Knock. A dull thud from behind me, muffled but clear. My first thought was that I'd hit something. I checked the mirrors, but the road behind me was empty. My second thought was that something in the trunk had shifted, but I knew my trunk was empty. Completely empty. Then it came again. Knock, knock. 2 sharp raps, louder this time, as if knuckles were striking the inside of the trunk. Deep down, I knew it wasn't nothing. I drove faster. The highway stretched endlessly ahead of me, but I kept my eyes locked on it, refusing to glance at the mirror. My chest tightened with every mile. Finally, I saw salvation. A glowing sign for a 24-hour gas station just off the next exit. I don't think I've ever pulled off a road so fast in my life. The lot was empty when I rolled in, just bright fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and a faint smell of burnt coffee drifting from the store inside. I parked under the lights, trying to convince myself I was safe. I forced myself out of the car, legs trembling, and walked to the trunk. My hand hovered over the latch for a moment before I finally pulled it open. Empty, just as I knew it would be. I laughed nervously, scanning the shadows around me, telling myself I'd imagined the whole thing. But even as I slammed the trunk shut, I couldn't shake the weight pressing on my chest. I went inside, grabbed a coffee, and lingered longer than I needed to. I didn't want to get back in the car. I didn't want to get back on that road. But eventually, I had no choice. Work would come again the next day, and I needed to sleep. So I climbed back in, started the engine, and pulled onto the empty highway. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. The hum of the tires, the ribbon of asphalt stretching endlessly ahead, my headlights cutting through the dark. I tried to sip my coffee, keep myself grounded. And then, against my better judgment, I glanced at the rearview mirror. My heart stopped. In the back seat, barely lit by the faint glow of the dashboard, sat a man. It was him. The figure from the roadside. His face was pale, almost gray, his eyes sunken but locked directly onto mine in the mirror. His lips didn't move, but his gaze pinned me to my seat. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. Just sat there, rigid, staring. I gasped and whipped my head around. The seat was empty, completely empty. I nearly lost control of the car, swerving into the opposite lane before I corrected. My chest heaved. My skin was damp with sweat. I forced my eyes forward, terrified of looking back. But the feeling of his presence lingered. I swear I could feel the weight of unseen eyes boring into the back of my skull. The rest of that drive was a blur. Every shadow seemed alive. Every bump in the road made me flinch. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a long time, too afraid to check the back seat again. Eventually, I stumbled inside, locked every door, and collapsed onto the couch with all the lights on. Sleep didn't come easily, and when it did, it was shallow and restless, filled with dreams of pale faces and mirrors. Even now, 2 years later, I can't drive that highway without unease. Sometimes, I'll see what looks like a figure in the distance and feel that same dread. Sometimes, when I'm especially tired, I swear I hear faint knocks coming from the trunk again. And every once in a while, if I catch my reflection just right in the rearview mirror, I see him, sitting silently in the back seat, waiting. I used to rent this tiny basement apartment in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing ever really happened. People walked their dogs in the evening, kids played on the sidewalks, and the loudest thing you'd usually hear at night was the hum of someone's AC unit kicking in. Honestly, I liked it that way. I'd had my fair share of chaotic living situations before, and the calm predictability of that little basement space felt safe. The apartment itself wasn't anything special, just a living room, a small kitchen, a cramped bathroom, and a bedroom tucked in the back. But what made it different from most basement apartments was that it had its own private entrance. A single door that opened directly to the driveway, just a few steps below ground level. That door had a small vertical glass panel in the center, maybe 6 inches wide, frosted so no one could see clearly inside. It let in just enough daylight to make the place feel less like a cave. Most nights I'd come home from work, heat up some food, and crash on the couch with my phone or the TV on low. I wasn't a party person. I didn't have many visitors, and that night was no different. It was just after midnight. I was slouched back on the couch, phone in hand, the glow of the screen the only real light in the room besides a dim lamp in the corner. Everything was still, calm, ordinary. That's when I heard it. 3 knocks, sharp, firm, on the basement door. At first, I didn't even register what it was. My brain tried to write it off as something else. The upstairs neighbors may be dropping something heavy, or the sound of a car door outside. But then it came again. 3 distinct raps against the wood. I froze. Nobody came to visit me, especially not at that hour. My landlord lived upstairs with his family, but if he needed something, he always texted me first. Midnight knocks weren't his style. Slowly, I set my phone down and leaned forward, listening. My heart was already picking up. I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe a neighbor at the wrong door. Maybe kids messing around. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I stood and crept toward the entrance. The closer I got, the heavier the silence seemed to get around me. My bare feet felt cold against the floor. The only sound was my own shallow breathing. When I reached the door, I hesitated before leaning to the side, peering through that narrow glass panel. At first, all I saw was darkness. Then, as my eyes adjusted, I realized there was a figure standing there, not moving, not knocking anymore, just standing. The frosted glass blurred the details, but I could make out the outline of a head and shoulders, the stillness of someone waiting. My stomach dropped. I swallowed hard and tried to sound casual, though my voice shook. Can I help you? Nothing. The figure didn't speak, didn't shift, just stood there like a shadow painted against the glass. A minute must have passed, though it felt longer. My skin prickled. Then without warning, the knocking started again. Louder this time. Harder. The door rattled in its frame, and I stumbled back a step, pulse hammering in my ears. This wasn't someone lost or confused. Whoever was out there wanted in. I thought about calling my landlord, but my phone was still on the couch across the room. I didn't want to turn my back on the door, not with that figure just standing there. I was caught in this awful hesitation, my mind spinning between options. Do I open it, yell for help, or just stay completely still and hope they go away? And then, the knocking stopped. For a moment, relief washed over me. Maybe they'd given up. Maybe it really had been some drunk neighbor or a prank, and they realized they had the wrong place. But that relief vanished as soon as I realized something chilling. The shadow wasn't at the door anymore. I blinked, leaning closer to the glass panel. Nothing. Empty driveway. My chest tightened, and that's when I heard it. A faint tapping sound, not from the door, from the bedroom. I turned slowly, every muscle in my body stiff with dread. The sound was coming from the small basement window near my bed, the one that sat low to the ground, barely above eye level outside. A window I rarely even thought about because it was half hidden behind the curtains. The tapping was deliberate, rhythmic. Someone was crouched down, right at that window, rapping lightly on the glass. My throat went dry. That window was barely a foot from where my head rested when I slept. The thought that someone could be outside, watching me night after night, made me feel sick. I forced my legs to move, inching toward the bedroom doorway. Every step felt like walking into a trap. The tapping stopped just as I reached the doorway, and the silence that followed was even worse. I didn't dare pull the curtain aside. I couldn't bring myself to look. Instead, I backed away, hands shaking, heart pounding so loud I swore it would give me away. I grabbed my phone from the couch and considered calling the police. But what would I even say? That some shadowy figure knocked on my door and tapped on my window? They'd be gone by the time anyone showed up. Minutes crawled by. I sat frozen on the couch, phone clutched in my hand, eyes darting between the door and the dark hallway leading to my bedroom. Every creak of the house above me made me flinch. Finally, mercifully, the silence stretched long enough that I dared to hope it was over. No more knocks, no more tapping, just stillness. But I didn't sleep that night. I sat awake until dawn, staring at the door, waiting for something else to happen. When the sun finally came up, I stepped outside. The driveway was empty, quiet, as if nothing had happened. But when I walked around to the side of the house where my bedroom window was, my stomach turned. On the glass, faint but unmistakable, were smudges. Greasy marks where fingers had pressed against the pane. I cleaned them off quickly, trying to convince myself it could have been anything. Kids, delivery workers, even myself by accident. But deep down, I knew. For weeks afterward, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak in the night made me jolt awake. Every shadow on the frosted glass made my heart leap. I slept with the lights on, curtains pulled tight, a kitchen knife within reach. The knocks never came again. But sometimes, when I'm lying in bed, I swear I can feel it. That prickling sensation, like eyes on me through the glass. And I can't help but wonder, how long had they been watching before they decided to knock?